Number 1. When I was about 6 years old, I lived in a place called Ocean Shores. It was a beautiful and friendly place to live. Tons of ocean waves and seashells everywhere. I lived in a 2-story duplex, and our rental was on the lower floor, but the upper floor was always empty and the doors were always unlocked. Nobody lived up there, and my parents were always busy, so I would go exploring upstairs. I remembered going into the other apartment and bringing my dolls with me. It had a weird, musty smell. It was like a time warp back into the 1970s, but not really, because this was the early 1990s, so I guess it may have been relatively normal. Nevertheless, it was dingy and brown with the ugly brown and orange sofas. It was like someone was living there, but nobody was. I sat down on the shaggy carpet to play with my dolls. While I was there, I got an eerie, confusing feeling. It was like someone was watching me, and I could feel an elderly couple staring down on me, but there was no one there. My mom came up, and she said she had a feeling I was up there. I got my spanking, and then we went back downstairs. I didn't tell my mom about the feeling, because there wasn't really anything to say. Things started getting weird about the house. I can't remember everything, but I do remember a creepy black cat outside the window that seemed to watch me. It scared the crap out of my mom. I was a 6-year-old girl at the time, so obviously I wasn't scared, and all I could think was, "Kitty!" I wanted to keep the cat. I would draw angels and things like that, but once I left the coloring pencils on the table. They levitated from the table, and then they danced around in circles. Obviously, my mom was pretty tripped out, and there wasn't much to do at that point. Maybe the right thing to do is to get up and run. For us, we just stared in disbelief, watching. It didn't last for very long. I think my mom said that on occasion, something would fly against the room, but I can't remember that part. I was always a little spooked by the house, and I always felt awkward being there. I was terrified to go to sleep, and strangely, my mom and my stepdad didn't think that I was trying to get out of it. I just constantly felt like there was something heavy, bulky, literally a dark shadow watching me sleep on the hide-a-bed in the living room. I didn't like the presence, and I wanted it to go. At the time, it was just a small town, and there wasn't anything to be afraid of. Last year, about over 20 years later, my mom finally called me and told me she had spoken to one of her friends. Her mom was a journalist in the town and mentioned that the home we were living in belonged to an elderly man who committed suicide in the garage by carbon monoxide poisoning. There was also the rumor that he mistakenly took his wife with him. I am not sure if that part is true or not, but the memory of feeling an elderly couple makes me wonder if it was. It still creeps me out to this day, and I'll never ignore that feeling of being watched ever again. Number 2. When I was first married to my second husband, we rented a house in eastern Pennsylvania. It was an old carriage house that had been converted to 2 apartments and then turned back into a 1-family unit. We experienced a lot of paranormal activity in this house. My kids would hear me calling them, only it wasn't me, and I hadn't called them. A substance resembling blood would run down the wall of my husband's and my bedroom, right above our bed. It might have been a kind of mold, but it was creepy nonetheless. There was a constant tapping noise behind the refrigerator. When I screamed at it to stop one morning, it only got louder and more intense. One of my sons was watching a program about footsteps up a staircase, and as soon as he shut off the TV, he heard the same kind of footsteps. The most disturbing occurrence was when my daughter, who was 5 at the time, saw a woman in a white wedding gown in her room. The area where her face should have been was all black. My sons witnessed her also. She pointed at my daughter and then flew out the window. When a family of mice moved in, we moved out. The presence of mice is sometimes thought to be a sign of a haunting. The house was later demolished and a new house was put up in its place. I often wonder if the new owners have experienced anything like we did. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare channel. I hope you enjoyed those 2 stories of haunted house experiences, the second one being my haunted house experience. If you have any true crime or paranormal stories that you would like to hear narrated on the Worst Nightmare channel, please email your stories to creepymina@gmail.com or upload them to the new subreddit WillingStories, where other YouTube horror genre creators may narrate them on their channels. Don't forget to comment, rate, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay safe.